It's NBT Reacts, where you send me examples of horrible, awful, disgusting, miserable training, and I tell you what went wrong and how we could fix it for next time. Our first submission comes to us via email, so I'm going to be reading off my screen. So this was labeled as a training session and starts off 250 people sitting in a very large theater. Don't even have to go to the next line. We've already got problems. First off, 250 people in a theater. You just know this is going to be a bunch of presentations because you're handcuffed. You're physically trapped in a seat. The likelihood of being able to easily do breakout sessions, group activities, hands-on learning, exercises, any sort of thing other than just sitting there and listening, the odds are pretty low that any of that's going to happen. And so you're going to be trapped in a passive listening type situation. And as we all know, and as we talk about here regularly, passive listening is not learning necessarily. So 250 people in a theater, but it's supposed to be training. Already we've got a problem. Houston, we've got a problem. 3 unrelated topics, 3 different speakers. Not necessarily a horrible thing. It'd be nice maybe to have a theme or some sort of consistent narrative in those 3 sessions, but sometimes you just have 3 unrelated topics. Not a bad thing necessarily. All of them had a slideshow. Okay, again, we all know our feelings at NBT about slideshows, but you do need to have a visual presentation. You need to have a visual element to augment the delivery of your materials. So having a well-done visual slideshow is great. Whether this one was good or not isn't clear. 3 hours of these three unrelated topics in 3 hours with 2 10-minute bathroom breaks. I'm not an expert, but 250 people all making a beeline for the toilet and having 10 minutes. I mean, I think you can see where this is going here. I mean, odds are somebody was in the next presentation that didn't really have a chance to go to the toilet, so there's a problem. They're not even going to be paying attention. And just logistically, I mean, somebody could have done the math to figure out 10 minutes is not even reasonable. So whoever made that decision, you got to have more time. And even if you think about the idea of adults need chances to reflect or even just sort of mentally cleanse your palate before you go to the next unrelated topic. So you get done with topic A and having 15, 20 minutes, even half an hour to just sort of decompress. Maybe people waiting in the queue for the toilet or waiting outside the theater, now they have a chance to discuss some of these topics that just got presented to them. So anyway, give people more time to go to the bathroom. Unclear which one was the most important topic. So 3 presentations, no real guidance on which one of these was important, more important, less important. It doesn't sound like they got any guidance if this was critical need to know information or if this was just sort of nice to know type information. And less is more when you're presenting information, certainly when you're training. And so having some sort of guidance of whether this is need to know, nice to know, level of importance, spectrum of how much you should pay attention, any of that, it's hard to stay at maximum learning for 3 hours, especially when you got to pee. 2 of the presenters did try to engage the audience, so good for that, and they tried to use QR code surveys. So real quick, QR code, that's where you scan with your phone, the little funky looking graphic, and it pulls up a website, in this case, some sort of survey. Okay, listen, I'm not a huge fan of surveys, especially as like an icebreaker, where you're just going to ask some sort of silly throwaway question. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite dessert? Where did you go on vacation? Any of that kind of stuff. It's no judgment, but it's not my cup of tea. If you're going to try to use the QR code to get some engagement, well, number one, a lot of things could go wrong with that. Is there even Wi-Fi in the theater? Or is everybody using their mobile data and can they even get signal? So My guess is not all 250 people filled out those surveys. Second of all, even if they all do, now you've got 250 surveys to go through. And I know that software, you probably get a pie chart, a bar graph, something like that. But naturally, you're going to have to ask a question and get a very sort of granular answer, because that presenter, if I'm guessing, was looking at their phone in real time and they just, okay, 53% of you answered yes. Cool. How does that lead you back to audience engagement and getting them actively considering the information so that they can cognitively imprint this on their brain? In other words, how does this help them actually learn anything? Or, otherwise it just becomes a 2, 3, 4 minute distraction. And instead of filling out that survey, they're probably checking their emails or jumping on socials, maybe checking out No Boring Training at LinkedIn. So QR code, I get what they were trying to do. Not great. Certainly not in 250 people audience. Some did attempt the turn to talk. So turn to talk, that's actually can be really good. That's where you give the audience a little bit of information and you say, okay, now turn to the person next to you and I want you to discuss blah, blah, blah. Have you ever used this before? How did it work out? Whatever. You give them some guidance and they talk amongst themselves. Really great technique, and I use that a lot in my sessions. However, 250 people, boy, first off, most of them aren't going to be paying attention. They're probably going to talk about non-pertinent things, and you can't see my screen, but the person who submitted this confirms that they talked about other stuff. So you can't really control the audience to make sure they're paying attention. If you got 10 people in a room and you're staring at them, they're talking about whatever you just asked them to talk about. 250 people, 10% of them are going to actually talk, 50% maybe. So it's not really effective. The other downfall is, of course, you don't have a great ability to debrief what was talked about. And that's really where the magic happens. In a classroom setting, you have people share, okay, what did you talk about? And then you get a conversation going, and then you as the instructor guide that conversation. If you had them paired up, you get the pairs sharing, and then now everybody's talking, and great things can happen. In a room of 250 people, it's not happening. Maybe you get a couple people to share, but not that many people were participating in the first place, and you can't really debrief it, so that's not great. And then lastly, we have not sure what I was supposed to take away or do afterwards. Oh! Again, if we're thinking about horrible, awful, miserable, boring training, you just sat there for 3 hours in some sort of Lord of the Flies type situation to be able to get a chance to use the toilet. You were probably on your mobile device checking stock futures or something. You really were probably only taking in a very small percentage of the information that was being shared. And then you get done and you go leave. Well, forget the fact that this isn't training. These are presentations, I'm guessing. Forget that. Even if it's presentations, the odds of this information sticking around in the audience's brain for any appreciable amount of time is going to be pretty low. And we can debate the amount of retention from vocally delivered presentations or Ebbinghaus. Forget all that stuff. Just experience tells us people aren't going to remember this information, and then you don't even give them the takeaway of how they're going to go out and use this information, how they're going to apply the information so that they have a fighting chance of, okay, I learned some stuff and now maybe I can go use it. You're hoping they figure it out on their own, and you don't even give them guidance of what to do with this. It's just bad all the way around. So NBT Reacts, there you go, our first ever submission of horrible, awful, miserable, boring training. And this sounds like 3 hours of abjectly wasted time. So what are your thoughts? Let me know. Leave me some comments down below, or if you want to submit your example of horrible, awful, miserable, boring training, send it to me at the email address on the screen, and I might react in the moment.